So I'm pretty sure I would make a terrible hacker. I don't know anything about code. I don't know anything about hacking. I don't even know who I would hack. Good thing I don't need to know anything about any of that to play this game. I'm Cassie, and this is a review of Intelle and Intelle Firewall on the Indie Game Report. Intelle is a two-player area control abstract game in which one player is the hacker and the other player is the corporation. Both players are attempting to gain control of 3 adjacent systems before the other. This review is actually going to contain 2 reviews in it. One is going to be for Intelle, the base game, which is currently available for purchase, and the other is going to be for the solo expansion for Intelle, Intelle Firewall, which is currently on Kickstarter. I'm going to go and show you how both games play, and then I'll tell you what I think of Intelle and Intelle Firewall. In Intelle, one player is the defending corporation, while the other is the attacking hacker, both making attempts to gain control of system tiles. Players take turns placing code blocks onto system tiles, trying to place their code blocks in either a straight line or every other space to gain control of the system tile. Control 3 adjacent system tiles, you control the mainframe, and are declared the winner of Intelle. The hacker starts the game by placing a code block onto a tile. The space of the tile onto which the hacker places their code block will determine the system tile in which their opponent, the corporation, may place their first code block. The corporation chooses any space within their assigned system tile, and whichever space they place their code block in will then determine the next system tile in which the hacker may place their code block. At some point, a player will have 3 code blocks in a line or will have code blocks on every other space on a system tile. When they place that third code block, they also place one of their control markers onto the system tile to show they now have control over the system. Eventually, a player will have control of 3 adjacent systems. Whichever player achieves this is the winner of Intelle. The solo expansion, Intelle Firewall, plays similarly, but incorporates firewall cubes and a solo deck of cards to control the mainframe, your artificially intelligent opponent. You are the hacker in Intelle Firewall, and you need to gain control of 5 total systems, regardless of adjacency, to win. The game starts with firewall cubes placed onto spaces determined by the solo card deck. You are the start player in Intelle Firewall. After you place your code block and determine the system tile in which the mainframe will start, you draw the top card of the solo card deck. The large space on the card determines which space on the tile the mainframe will place its code block. If that space is occupied, work down the list on the right from the top to bottom to determine the space. If you ever get sent by the mainframe to a system tile which contains a firewall cube, you must place your code block onto the space in place of the firewall as opposed to your space of choice. Firewalls also count towards control of a system tile for the mainframe, making it easier for it to gain control of a system tile and for you to lose the game. Eventually, you'll either gain control of 5 system tiles, or the mainframe will prevent you before you get the chance. That's how you play Intelle and Intelle Firewall. Alright, now I'm going to share my opinion of Intelle, and then in a little bit I'm going to share my opinion of Intelle Firewall, the solo expansion. To start, I want to talk about the art and the graphic design of Intelle, and I have to say the art really isn't my thing. I think the art is a little too bubbly for me. The curves around the edges of the characters and everything were a little more just rounder than I guess I'm used to or I would find attractive, and the color scheme of the box, the theme of the game, those things just don't really attract me too well. So honestly, if I hadn't played the game before or wasn't asked to review the game, I probably would not have taken this game off the shelf just by the appearance of the artwork alone. I also would like to talk about the graphic design of the system tiles and keeping track of the colors and where you're going to place your cubes and where your opponent has to place their cube blocks. I think that the graphic design was a little difficult to follow along with, not for me because I was able to use the colors to keep track of where my opponent was sending me and where I was sending my opponent. But if I was, say, colorblind and I was keeping track of those things based off of the iconography, I probably would have been really confused just trying to see exactly what was going on and where everybody was sending each other. Only because a lot of those icons appeared to be similar. They're all within that computer technology theme imagery. So they go with the theme very well, but for me, you know, like I kind of started this video by saying I don't know anything about code or hacking or any of that stuff. So for me, the theme didn't get me, and then also having iconography that is related to the theme just made it a little more difficult for me, to be honest. So like I said, the colors don't bother me because I'm not colorblind, but if I was colorblind, I probably would have had a little bit of a difficulty following along with where code blocks are being sent, only because, like I said, the iconography, everything just seemed really similar to each other. But I actually don't play this game because I am looking at the artwork and I'm looking at the icons. I have been playing this game a lot because I really, really enjoy the gameplay. The reason I like the gameplay of Intelle so much is because it provides the ability to make a programmable strategy. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever played like a puzzle game like Sudoku or like a logic puzzle, you're kind of crossing things off to make educated guesses about what is really going on in the game. And so if you're in Sudoku, maybe the 7 is here, and so you can cross areas off. And in logic puzzles, it tells you who's doing certain things, so you can slowly cross things off. And in Intelle, you're kind of trying to predict what's going to happen next by crossing things off. So what I mean by that is I put my code block on a blue space, and I send my opponent to the blue system tile. Once they get there, I have to kind of predict ahead of time what they're going to do. I don't want to send them to the blue tile if they're going to probably send me somewhere that's not going to be helpful for me. So I need to plan ahead of time. I need to determine, do I want them to send me to the blue tile, or do I want them to send me to the yellow tile, because my chances of gaining control of that tile are greater, or my chances of stopping them from gaining control of a tile are greater if I am sent there and then they send me there. You just can kind of make a strategy really far down the line. And that's not a thing you get much from quicker, lighter 2-player games, and that's one of the things I like so much about Intelle. It's really hard to get a nice 2-player game to the table where it allows you to make that kind of puzzly, logical, programmable strategy. And I just really appreciate that Intelle offers that to me because, like I said, I don't get that very often for 2-player games, and I really, really like them. I mostly only get them in solitaire games, and that's what I like so much about the Intelle 2-player game. All right, so I just mentioned that I, most of the time, will experience that programmable strategy feeling from solitaire games, and very rarely do I get it from a 2-player game, but I actually don't really get that feeling from the solitaire version of Intelle, and it's mostly because there's a deck of cards that are making the determinations for your future locations, and you can't predict that. So unless you're doing some card counting, it's going to be really difficult for you to predict what colors are going to come up next, and that just makes the game totally different. And I still like it, but it's a different kind of like. It doesn't give me that same logic puzzly feeling that I get when I'm playing the Intelle 2-player game. Intelle Firewall is pretty difficult. I think I have won, but I also find it difficult because now you're not trying to get control of 3 adjacent systems, which really isn't as difficult as one would seem, at least for me, because there's a center tile when you're playing the 2-player game, so getting adjacency isn't as difficult, like I said, as you might think. But in the Firewall expansion, you're only getting, you don't have to get adjacency, but you have to get 5 tiles, and that's pretty hard. What I noticed when I was losing is it's not because I wasn't getting my 5th tile in time, it was because the mainframe was getting a 3rd tile. As soon as the mainframe would get a 3rd tile, the game is over. I can't win. There's no 5th tile to acquire now. And I know it's like I said, it's chaotic, there's no strategy, there's no programming, but I like that there's a challenge. It's like, okay, I'm gonna send the mainframe to the system tile by putting my code block here. I don't know what's gonna happen. This could go really bad for me, or it could go really good for me. Let's go ahead and flip the next card and find out. And that's a lot of fun for me. It's like, you don't know what's gonna happen, but you still can, you have to build your strategy in the moment, which I guess is what's really the big difference between Intelle Firewall and Intelle the base game is, in Intelle the base game, you can build your strategy like a couple of turns along, hopefully, but in Intelle Firewall, you can't do that. You can only build your strategy in the moment, and that gives it a different feeling, but it doesn't make it a bad feeling. And so I really appreciate how the game uses the same components and it has the same kind of feeling with it, but then you add a deck of cards and some Firewall cubes, and all of a sudden you've got a completely different game, but it still uses the same core mechanics. And I liked it. I liked both of the games a lot. I also want to say with the Firewall cubes that are in the Intelle Firewall expansion, it's cool because, you know, when you get to a tile, you have to remove the Firewall cube first, but you also are going to lose a lot because those Firewall cubes count in benefit to the mainframe, and I don't know, it just like added an additional thing. It's not, you know, just a deck of cards that are chaotic. You also are being forced to remove these cubes when you land on the system tiles. And so altogether, I really liked the base game and I really liked the Solitaire expansion. Both of them provided me with entertainment, but it was different kinds of entertainment, and I can appreciate both of them a lot. If you liked what you saw in this review and you want to get a copy of Intelle for yourself, it is available for purchase right now, and you can learn how to do that down below. If you want to get a copy of Intelle Firewall, you're going to have to check out that campaign at Kickstarter, and that is also available down below. If you've got some comments or would like to subscribe, you can go ahead and do either of those. And if you want the Indie Game Report to check out your game, check out our website down below. I'm Cassielle. Thanks for watching the review of Intelle and Intelle Firewall by Fisher Heaton Games. I'll see you next time.